we do. In the case of public affairs, we do a cooperative advertising program right now where we're running TV and radio ads on behalf of credit unions. But the most fundamental thing we do is we work with lawmakers to help inform them about credit union issues. And by the way, one example of that is you and your colleagues just wrapped up some very intense discussions about our budget and tax issues. And you know, it would have been easy, especially with the banking industry saying you ought to tax credit unions. It would be easy for some lawmakers to say, hey, we ought to just remove that tax-exempt status for credit unions. But to your credit and to your colleagues' credit, you know, we're very thankful that on both sides of the aisle there's a pretty clear understanding that tax issues aren't that simple. If you take away the tax incentives to be credit unions, and credit unions just convert to banks, those 40 million people who are benefiting from that helping hand from the not-for-profit provider, a lot of that goes away. At the very time where, you know, our Michigan economy is hurting and people need more providers and greater access to credit and so on. So yeah, one of our fundamental roles is to help lawmakers understand the issues and help them understand the differences between credit unions and banks and why it's important that some of those policies exist.
And you do that in a variety of ways. Obviously, I've participated in that, and it's been always a very helpful session for me. You request legislators from different regions to come and give legislative updates. You try to expose them to the credit union and their members, so they kind of put a face with, you know, the policy.
Right.
And it certainly has given me the opportunity to call on some of the credit union, would you call them CEOs in my district?
Yep. CEOs, managers. Correct.
Okay.
And the unpaid volunteers who serve on the boards of directors.
Okay. Yeah. In the past, what kind of legislation has your group tried to promote that actually has passed that is a direct effect of the league?
Well, the greatest example is in the 2001-2002 timeframe. With your help and your colleagues' help, we were able to modernize our Michigan Credit Union Act, which, among other things, probably the most important thing that legislation did, is it broke down some of the barriers that inhibited credit unions from being able to expand their fields of membership. So now credit unions can more freely, more easily, more cost-effectively expand their fields of membership to serve broader communities. And so we're seeing that happen. And then there were some other provisions in that legislation that helped credit unions with their investment ability, with getting rid of unnecessary regulations and so on. The bottom line in the legislation is it helped credit unions grow and expand and operate with less regulatory burden. And that accrues to the benefit of those members that they serve, the 4.4 million, who are now able to more easily gain access to a credit union and be able to get access to products and services with less red tape.
Okay. Maybe help the audience to understand how you start on a project that big, because certainly you have those other organizations that are in opposition of something like that. And I think when you know, people think of those who lobby us in Lansing, they're thinking of lobbyists, and you wouldn't refer to yourself as a lobbyist.
Well, I personally am a registered lobbyist. I have a team of lobbyists who are here in Lansing. But you know, that, as you know, that really, the average consumer doesn't realize that the way that things get done, first of all, politics are all local, and laws don't get passed based on a lobbyist showing up in Lansing and say, I want to pass this bill. What has to happen is there has to be a tremendous amount of relationship building at the local level, discussions that take place at the local level on a wide range of issues. And then from that, when the time comes where there is legislation being introduced, you get sponsors, you start talking to all the different lawmakers, and hopefully there are enough positive policy implications in what you're looking for that your issue can make it to the top or make it to the top of the priority list. Because you and your colleagues have to deal with so many issues. And so it's a process that starts with local involvement. All these volunteer board members and credit union staff, and in fact some of their members, have to get involved in local meetings with their lawmakers and then help us out with putting the issues together and coming to Lansing.
Have you seen a change under term limits? You know, you have legislators that are here for a very short period of time. Does it make your job more difficult? Maybe kind of explain the effects of term limits to the audience.
Well, I think the effect of term limits, there are positives and negatives. I personally am not a big fan of term limits because I think over time, I think without formal term limits, I think that over time changes are made naturally. But with term limits being in place, it has helped us in our lobbying role in some respects and hurt us. Those who would say that it's a bad thing is that, once there was a time where lawmakers were really entrenched in leadership positions, and for those lobbyists who had really good relationships, they had less work to do because they knew who they could count on. In a term limit environment, with all the change that takes place, that isn't the case. I think that the issues have to stand on their own merit, and I think it is more of a citizen legislature with less politics, perhaps, than what there was pre-term limit. But I think that on balance, it's been helpful to a relatively small consumer-driven group like credit unions, because we typically don't have as much influence in terms of money influence and clout of the size of the industry as, say, the banking industry would have. We've had to rely on the strength of our issues and the connection between our constituents and lawmakers. And so I think in many respects, term limits has actually made it easier for an industry like ours to affect change in Lansing. Mm-hmm. That's my assessment.
Yeah. Do you find that you're educating legislators quite often about, you have very complicated issues, to grasp.
Yeah, complicated,
yes.
Technical, financial issues that are not as easy for consumers to understand sometimes.
Okay.
Well, I think the education process is ongoing. And again, I give tremendous credit to you and your colleagues because you have to be able to sort through some pretty technical things to decide whether it makes good policy sense or not.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on short on time, and I didn't mean to not go on to the next subject. But before we end, are there any really hot button issues that the audience should be aware of that is coming across either in the economy or with the Credit Union League?
Well, in the economy, we could spend a whole lot of time talking about Michigan's economy, the high foreclosure rate, the effect of unemployment on real estate values and so on. These are very tough times for Michigan. What I would say, I don't think we don't need to convince many people that these are tough economic times. What I would say is that it's very important in times like these to have options like credit unions, because credit unions provide those benefits that we've been talking about, and they're needed, they're more relevant than they've ever been. And so we're really happy that lawmakers like you are helping us advance an agenda and do good things for consumers.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time to examine kind of the use of credit unions, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in this month, and we'll see you next month. This is State Senator Michelle McManus.